The Office is one of the most successful sitcoms of all time, which served as a launchpad for so many of its stars. However, although Steve Carell's performance as Michael Scott may be the standout, a sitcom can only really work if everyone is working in tandem, as most of the laughs aren't just achieved by what one character is doing, but how the other characters react to it. But of all of The Office's cast, there is one actor who's most identified with the show, Rainn Wilson, as he somehow managed to make someone as absurd as Dwight Schrute so believable that it's hard to separate the art from the artist. Yet in reality, Rainn shares almost nothing in common with the character he manifested on screen. Rainn Wilson was raised in the Baha'i faith. His mother abandoned him when he was just 18 months old, and at the age of 3, he then moved to the Nicaraguan jungle with his father, who was an abstract painter and science fiction writer. After his father remarried, in what Rainn described as a hollow and loveless marriage, the family moved back to Seattle, where as a teenager he struggled to engage with his emotions. He joined NYU's acting program and quickly discovered he had an instinct for comedy, finally feeling a sense of love and acceptance that had been absent in his early life. After he graduated at 23, he was an on and off working actor, occasionally popping up in small film and television roles until he auditioned for The Office, competing against well-established names like Seth Rogen and Patton Oswalt.
That's a fact. Did you know that? When you are in the field, you can clean a wound by whizzing on it.
But there was really no comparing how fleshed out his audition felt in comparison to the others. And it was now, at the age of 38, that he would finally get to showcase his comedic chops for the world to see, earning him 3 consecutive Emmy nominations. But what is it about this performance that not only makes us laugh, but captures our imagination? Let's take a deeper look at how Rainn Wilson perfected Dwight Schrute over 9 seasons of The Office. The first key is characterization. Due to his theatre training, Rainn approached creating a character a bit differently than most comedians. He understood that in order to play Dwight properly, he needed to be a fully 3-dimensional character as opposed to just playing a goofball. And it was actually through taking the character seriously that he captured the most important aspect of Dwight: his sincerity. For the viewer, Dwight Schrute is obviously one of the silliest characters in The Office, but he of course doesn't view himself that way. In his mind, he's the smartest guy in the room, which we see whenever he looks to camera, as these are the smug moments where he believes he's being validated as correct or a step ahead of everyone else, even though he's usually wrong. This classic contrast between how a character views themselves versus how the rest of the world sees them is what generates most of the laughs. But if Rainn wasn't fully bought into everything he's saying, no matter how ridiculous, it just wouldn't land as hard.
To say the most absurd, ludicrous things with an absolutely straight face, yes, without any kind of hint at all that there was a joke there.
Almost every comedic dynamic has one character playing it silly while the other is playing it straight, as this allows the viewer to identify with the straight character, and then sort of together, we watch the silly character's behaviour unfold. So Rainn really needed to sell Dwight as a true believer in whatever he's saying. He has to look focused, determined, and fully bought in. So notice how through his many ridiculous quotes in interviews over the course of the show, the actor picks one spot to look at and holds his attention there, barely even blinking. This makes it feel more intense, and becomes more authentic as it seems like the words are just pouring out of his brain, unfiltered and pure. He's taking himself seriously, too seriously for the silliness he's saying. And this also feeds into a different aspect of the character perfectly. Dwight is highly gullible, but not just because he's stupid, but because no matter what he's doing, he always gives it his full attention. This makes him totally ignorant of anything going on outside of what he's focused on, like other people's reactions or the game that might be being played on him. You can just present him any scenario, and because he takes himself so seriously and can't see anything outside the task at hand, he buys into it. And the actor physically communicates this blind spot by keeping his eyes fixed on one point at a time. He's not looking around for reassurance or trying to see the bigger picture. He's just locked onto his target and giving it 100%, as if the rest of the world didn't even exist. But similar to comedic characters like Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, Dwight also struggles to read the room, which can lead to these hilariously deadpan responses.
She was so innocent.
She was stoned, apparently.
Let's go check out the master bedroom.
The cast improvised quite a lot, usually sticking to the script 80% of the time, but then finding some magic in these off-the-cuff reactions, which would keep each actor on their toes, as they never knew if someone was about to go off script or not. But Dwight's backstory was actually developed through improv, as in the weeks before they started shooting, Greg Daniels used to have them all just improvise as their character to see what came out.
And I just improvised and I went, I really had not planned it at all. I was like, my name is Dwight Schrute. My father's name, Dwight Schrute. His father's name, Dwight Schrute.
The next key is how Dwight plays off Michael. As we touched on earlier, when the characters are developed enough and a sitcom is operating like a well-oiled machine, we start to intuitively anticipate how each character will react to any situation. I mean, just in this photo, we can see the personality of each main character fully encapsulated in this one still image. Jim is the smug one who isn't taking anything too seriously, Michael is proud and too emotionally invested, and Dwight is taking himself and the silly scenario too seriously. Or here, we see Michael lying to camera like a deer in headlights, Dwight still believing every word, and Jim skeptical in the background with his arms folded. But of all of the characters in The Office, Rainn's most important scene partner was Steve Carell, as the two needed to find a balance between codependence, unrequited feelings, and genuine affection. So Wilson chose to play Dwight like a loyal dog, always watching and paying close attention to his master, as if everything he's saying is of the utmost importance. This makes the dynamic far funnier, as not only is Michael behaving like an infant, but he's constantly being backed by someone who fully respects him. And Wilson makes sure that everything Dwight does for Michael is done with full commitment. Whether he's spraying an excessive amount of hairspray, lathering his hair with peanut butter, which he then tastes to show his lack of boundaries, or using a tiny fan to cool Michael's injured foot. But just look at the laser-focused expression on his face. You'd swear he's performing open heart surgery, as Rainn makes Dwight commit to each menial task with equal levels of dedication and precision. The show works because Michael and Dwight both lack self-awareness, but in different ways. Michael is soft and needy, while Dwight is harsh and authoritarian. They have completely different worldviews and want something very different out of social interactions. Michael seeks validation while Dwight seeks information.
What's the square footage?
But both of these characters are essentially partners in stupidity. They feed off one another, whether they're fighting, dancing, or celebrating. But a perfect encapsulation of how they deepen each other's ignorance is when they rehearse a phone call with a client, played by Jim. After making Dwight look rude, Michael takes over the phone call, and Jim pretends his fake character is so impressed with Michael's response that he's willing to buy $1 million worth of paper right then and there, but only on one condition.
You have to fire the salesman that treated me so terribly.
Don't do it, Michael.
It's $1 million sale.
There's a lot to love in this scene. From the genuine joy Michael and Dwight feel from the fake $1 million offer, to the speed at which Dwight says, "Don't do it, Michael," to Michael genuinely considering firing Dwight for a fake sale, both failing to remember that none of this is real. But just look at Rainn's expression, the urgency, the sincerity, the fear. As we mentioned earlier, he always gives his full attention to whatever's in front of him, and therefore loses sight of everything else. As if he even looked away from Michael once, the scene would fall apart, as he would see Jim and remember it's fake, or simply consider a world outside of this phone call. But instead he's locked on to Michael as if he holds his fate in his hands, fully invested. Which leads into our final key, physical comedy. One of Dwight's key character traits is his respect for rules and authority. He does what he's told, which is why he wants to be in charge so badly, as that way he can finally be the one to rule over everyone with an iron fist. But Rainn embodies this aspect of the character in every scene. Yes, he loyally obeys Michael because he's the boss, but it doesn't stop there. He also does everything the way he's been taught without questioning it. When he's taught karate, he takes on each learned mannerism and executes it sincerely. When Jim teaches him how to deliver a great speech like an authoritarian, he physically does it exactly the way he was told, banging his fists off the table and raising them in the air. When he's told sitting on a ball instead of a chair is good for flexibility, he does it without even thinking about how annoying that will be for everyone else. Wilson just has great comedic instincts when it comes to movement, as it always stems from his character. He's often systematic with how he moves, coming across robotically, which is probably why he was cast as a robot in the spy classic Threat Level Midnight. But even here, just look at how he executes multiple character motivations in one swift movement.
We're getting rid of everything that reminds you of Carol.
Hey, what's the haps?
In this scene, Michael needs to get over Carol, so Dwight starts systematically packing up her items in a box, but he's also competing against Andy to be Michael's number 2. So while he's in this cold headspace of being cruel to be kind to Michael, it also feeds into how he treats Andy. As if he's thinking, we don't have time for these toxic distractions, Michael. This is the medicine you need. No more Carol, and also no more Andy. These people are bad for you. Ever since college, Wilson always had a knack for physically committing to the bit to earn the laugh.
Did a scene where you're supposed to pretend that you're in your bedroom and that no one's watching, right? And I started just thrashing around and just being ridiculous and lip syncing and jumping around and flopping on the floor and stuff like that. And I was a brand new student. This was like in the first week at this new school, and it brought the house down.
And this skill is on full display throughout the office, as he earnestly commits to every movement, no matter how embarrassing it looks. Whether he's pumping himself up to ask for a raise, transforming into a confused baby when he's concussed, viciously attacking a piñata, or pulling a knife out of his boot to harvest a dummy's organs. But the humour still always stems from how straight he's playing it. He never smiles or appears aware of how ridiculous he looks, as that would let us see that he's in on the joke. Whereas the more certain he seems, the funnier it gets, and therefore the more impactful it is when we cut to the other characters' reactions. As unlike a stand-up comedian, sitcoms are team sports. Everyone has to work together to make what the other person is doing even funnier. Rainn wanted Dwight to come across as both a nerd and a bully, someone who thinks it's his job to lay down the law and be the hero, despite the evidence that he tends to only make matters worse. For instance, let's check out the scene where there's a fire in the office, which is a masterful display of physical comedy. Once the alarm sounds, obviously Dwight is the first person out of his chair, doing everything by the book. But Rainn then fully commits to the bit by grabbing the bottle from the water cooler and then ineffectually tossing splashes of water towards the smoke, as if it's some sort of ghost he's trying to vanquish, before just tossing the whole bottle into the room like it's some sort of grenade that will hold down the fort as he searches for more weaponry. Then I just love how he sort of karate punches the fire extinguisher case like a trained professional, before having to feebly pull the canister out of the box to not cut himself on the glass. Then he needlessly grabs Kelly and actually slows her down by trying to play the hero. And as he shouts advice at her, drool trickles out of his mouth, as if everything we've seen so far has fully taken it out of him, and he's feeling the intensity of this life or death situation. And finally he then drops to the floor and starts crawling, like someone clearly taught him to do in an emergency situation, wriggling his way towards the door, which is once again the slowest way he could have escaped. It's all just so perfectly in character, from doing things by the book, to taking himself too seriously, to getting in the way more than he's even helping. So while there are many standout performances in The American Office, there is something undeniably unique about Rainn Wilson's portrayal of Dwight Schrute. As while any of us could dress up in the same mustard shirt, slap on some Dahmer glasses, and do an average impression of Dwight, nobody could embody that same level of authenticity he brought to the role. He became Dwight through his reactions, his tunnel vision, and his obedience to authority. Understanding that sometimes there's nothing funnier than not being in on the joke. Well, if you've made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now give the video a like, possibly even leave a comment and click on that subscribe button, it will encourage that mysterious algorithm to do its thing.